Hi, I'm going to walk us all the way through the banner exercise. It's an introductory exercise for building websites in Google Sites. And I'm going to use this as an introduction to Photoshop and use the vocabulary and try to introduce you to the skills that you'll need to start using Photoshop more regularly. This is going to be geared to the TIJ class, although this will apply to other classes, TGJ, 2O, 3M, and 4M as well. So here's where it starts. For TIJ students, we have to go locate the portfolio template, the banner template. It's a Photoshop file that's already preset to introduce you to this. And if you can find your way to the gallery, you can get there through the agenda and click on the web gallery up at the top. We can find the gallery of all of the TIJ portfolios that we've made in the past. And the instructions say go to the very, very bottom floor, way down there. Right at the bottom, there's a template. Don't click that. That'll give you a preview. Click the download button. And when you download, you'll probably be downloading to your P drive. In this particular case, I'm just going to hit save and make note of what the name is. This one is dated 2016. Yeah, sure. We'll wipe out that old one. And once it's downloaded, you'll notice that it appears at the bottom of your Chrome browser, trusting you're using Chrome. Click the little up arrow, show in folder, and you can find the file pretty quickly. And the file is right down at the bottom. There it is. So the next thing to do is move this file up to the proper folder, and if this was going into my first TIJ class in the morning, I'm going to drag it into that folder there. You should have done your folder management exercises already. So now I can find this thing. As a matter of fact, inside that folder, I'm going to make a new folder for Photoshop. This is the first unit that we do in the class. So Photoshop, always organize these files, and I'm going to move it right in there so I can find it later on if I need to. So inside Photoshop, I can double click this to open it. If you've already opened up Photoshop, it loads up pretty quickly. And this is your introduction to Photoshop for a lot of you, so I'm going to take my time and kind of give you the guided tour here. Inside of this screen, you've got various areas that you should know the names of. First and foremost, what just popped up there was called a canvas. It appears in its own little window. You can have multiple canvases open at any one time. As a matter of fact, we'll open another one up to try to put somebody's face in there. The canvas can be stretched. You can grab the corner of it, make it a little bit bigger. The visible area is only there on the inside of that rectangle. The gray area around the outside is sometimes useful. If you were going to move an object like this, you can see the boundary of that object is bigger than the canvas. You can actually move it up and down to crop out certain areas of it. You get the idea. On the left is the toolbar. It's a standard setup. Most useful tool for us today is going to be the Move tool, which is at the top. And if you hover over one of these tools, it tells you the name, in this case Move tool. And it'll also tell you the shortcut. There's a V beside that, and if you're really good, you memorize those shortcuts, and that speeds things up. At the top is the drop-down menu. There's lots of things we'll wind up doing with the drop-down menu up at the top every now and again. I'd also like to point out that under the drop-down menu is the Options menu. And depending on what you select, the options keep changing. Later on, we'll be using the Text tool. This is where you can control the font face, the style, the font size, color, all that sort of stuff. So depending on what you click, it's going to keep changing that stuff. There is an undo function, one of your best friends. Control Z does the same thing as the undo function. You can also redo. That's a Control Y that will redo things if you undo something and then realize you wanted to reverse that again. One of the most important places is the layers palette. It's down here. And you can see that this particular graphic is made up of many layers. This is the difference between Photoshop and, say, MS Paint. You paint with layers, and you'll notice the top layer is the thing that's sort of closest in the stack to our eyes, and it's got the word Textbook in it. It's labeled. You can double click these things and actually name the layers, and you'll notice Textbook is highlighted when we click on it. TIJ is highlighted when we click on its layer, and you can turn these things off. Just hide them. It doesn't destroy them, but you can turn these things off to simplify what you see on the screen, and I would suggest you could try turning everything off except for the background for now, just to get started. We've got various backgrounds. There's another one there that's just sort of a solid blue. Well, we'll start with something like that. Maybe we'll leave TIJ on for the moment. Hey, what's this TIJ over here? Oh yeah. You'll notice that some of these layers have a T beside them. Well, that means that it is a text layer. And a text layer is editable. I could actually click on this with the Text tool and change this if I wanted to change this. And you probably should, to say your name. Trusting you have a different name than I do. That's the way you can do it. And once you take this stuff, you can also highlight it. You can change the font size for it, tidy things up a little bit. Move tool, you can move any element in any of the layers. But I wanted to point out one of the tricky things in here is you'll notice the textbook at the very top. It does not have a T beside it. And that is because, well, I'm going to turn off this layer so it's not as confusing. Textbook is not a text layer. You cannot edit it with the text tool. It's actually made of pixels. And if I use the zoom tool and really zoomed in on it, you could see those pixels there. They cannot be changed using the text tool. You would have to actually delete it or use the eraser tool or something else. Here, use the eraser tool and I might want to erase that sort of thing. I cannot erase a text layer. If I turned it back on for the fun of it, let's see how it behaves. Turn off textbook. I'm going to turn on Mr. Main. Notice the name of this thing changed. The text layer's names change. And if I try to erase text, yeah, you can't do that. Hope you get the idea, but text layer is like having a little mini word processor inside there. To zoom in, you can see you can use a magnifying glass, but here's a faster way to zoom in and out. Try double-clicking the hand tool right there in the toolbar. Double-click it. It zooms out to show you the entire canvas on your screen, no matter how big your screen is. If you double-click the magnifying glass, it zooms in so it's showing you pixel for pixel the exact quality of the image that you have and how big it would be on a website. In this case, it's zoomed into 100%. And I'm going to grab this and make it a little bit bigger. But now I have to use the scroll bar to see one side to the other. I like using double-clicking the hand tool, maxing out the canvas size a little bit, and that's a good way to work. So there's the start of it. And you get the idea of the layers, the use of them. You can delete layers if there's a layer you don't need. For instance, I don't think I need layer 5. Try selecting it first and then hitting the trash can and saying, yeah. And it removes that layer and simplifies things. The bulldog, I'm going to trash that. I don't think we're going to use that. The mind wheel, you know what? I don't think we're going to use that, so I'm going to simplify this. And even textbook, I think I'm going to simplify that by trashing that layer. Okay, we might use this. Probably going to use this. Probably going to use this. And we can modify these things later on. Okay, so here's the instructions that you're going through. Let's make sure we're kind of catering to what we have to do. To get back and forth from the Photoshop window to the tutorial window, I'm holding down the Alt key and tapping the Tab key one at a time until I get to the page that I want to. And in this case, I'd like to go back to the tutorial, and I'm going to try to step through it with you a little bit here. We've already done step 1 in this tutorial. We've downloaded the file, and we've opened it up. We've checked out the layers palette. We've gotten all the way through this. Changing the text, we actually did that too. We found the text tool, we found a text layer, we used the move tool, so we've actually completed step 2 as well. Step 3 is the one that tends to confuse people a little bit, so I'm going to see if I can find a student picture to put in there. And with any luck, we'll be able to resize it, put it in place, and I'll whip through this sort of stuff. So here's how we do that. Alt-Tab takes me back to Photoshop. And let's see, I've got to go find myself a photo. I wonder if I can find one. Well, I'm going to go down to my Start menu and open up my documents, and maybe in my archives somewhere I can find a picture. I hope I can. Photoshop. There's a graphic. No, that's not going to do. Sorry, I haven't really prepared this very well. That's fine. Nope, that's not going to do either. This one probably not big enough. Sorry, I'm going to shrink this window so you can actually see File Management window. Is very handy because you can get a little preview of what you're looking for here. I'm looking for a TIJ Photoshop. I hope I haven't looked there already. Oh, there's a picture. I can take this one maybe. Okay, so I'm going to take this picture and I'm going to put it in place. To open up this picture in Photoshop, you can just drag it out of the File Management window and just drag it anywhere in the Photoshop window, and it'll eventually open up. That is not a flattering photo, but oh well. Now, here's the next thing. To move that picture from there into the banner, notice it's opened in a second canvas. I'm going to click on the Selection tool. Your Selection tool is a few rows down. It might be an elliptical shape or it might be a rectangle, depending on if you've clicked and held and changed it to whatever. But I'm going to go back to a square shape, a rectangular shape, and I'm just going to grab the area that I think I need, something like that. Now, once I've selected the area, I'm going to use the Move tool and actually drag it from one window or one canvas onto the other. And I'm going to try to put it sort of dead center in the top canvas. And you'll notice it is way too big. This is a high-res picture, and the banner doesn't have to be that high in resolution. So here's how I'm going to resize it now. Now to get this thing out of the way, I'm just going to minimize it. stash it down, and it shows up in the bin down below. Notice what's going on in the layers right now. When I dragged it in, it put it onto a layer in the layers palette, in its own layer. You can take this and you can drag it down in the stack so that things above the text layers will start showing up on top of it. That sort of puts it into context. Now the next trick to resize this graphic easily, well, first trick, make the canvas as big as you can, and sometimes you can see the edges of the graphic. If you can't, the trick is to go Control-T. That's a transform. Control-T will activate some new options at the top. I'm going to do it now. And make sure you're in layer 7, or your new layer that you just created. Control-T, and the new options at top give you the white width and the height, and should lock the constrained proportions. And if you take this and just change the value, I'm going to take it to 30% or so. Notice, you can now start to see the edges and the control handles on the canvas. Once again, if you can't, make sure the canvas is as big as you can make it. And once you get those control handles, you can then grab the corners and you can shrink them down. If you happen to have an image that is sideways, that is on its side, you can also rotate this. If you hover outside the corner handle, start to roll it and hold down the Shift key, and it locks it into 45 degrees and 90 degrees so that you could rotate it any way you wanted. But obviously in this case, it's going to be pretty good right about there. I'll be good with that. As for the size of this thing, when you resize, you get an idea of what it's going to look like. You don't have to shrink it down too small. A lot of times students will make it so small that it's a minuscule little picture. My suggestion is to go for a close-up, or better yet, an extreme close-up. Cut off the top of your head. You can cut off the bottom of your mouth as well. Just something that fairly clearly identifies who you are. And you want to move this over to this side. And when you hit the check mark, you've locked in and resolved the image. So it's going to be locked in at that size. Now, depending on which way you took the picture, you may want to flip it around. A general rule of design is to make sure that people are looking in from the outside edge of a page. In this particular picture, I'm looking the wrong way. I'm looking to the outside edge. So I'm going to go up to Image and Rotate, and I'm going to rotate just that layer in the Layers palette. And to rotate just the layer, I slide on over here. Don't do a flip horizontal. That'll flip the entire canvas. But flip Layer Horizontal, flips this around so now it's looking the right way. You can also tap the arrow key to move things into place, or Shift arrow to move things a little faster. The idea here is to try to put this thing roughly where it should be. And I'm going to put it right about there. Done. So that's the image in place. Nice. Alt-Tab. I'm going to go back to the tutorial. Whoops, Alt-Tab a few times, I guess. There it is. And all these tips are written down here, so you should have no problem getting through this. Step 4, erase the face edges. The face edges, Alt-Tab, get back to Photoshop. I left a lot of that background. Took a great picture with a neutral wall, and I left a sort of a neutral background. Now this is where you have to be really careful. Make sure you're on Layer 7. This is your photo layer. In fact, if you want, double-click Layer 7 and call it Photo. So you know what it is. And you can fix typos with it too. Nice. And what I'm going to do for this one, the process is to use the Eraser tool. Great introduction to that. The Eraser tool you select, you get a bunch of options at the top. The first thing you want to do is change the brush size by clicking the little downward-facing arrow. And I would suggest a brush size of about 65 soft edge right there. And then close that palette. You can also get to that option by right-mouse clicking anywhere. When you have the Eraser tool, it brings that palette up automatically, so you can change this very, very quickly. You know what? I'm actually going to change this to 100 because this picture is going to be pretty forgiving. I've got 100. That is the radius, I believe. Oh no, maybe it's the diameter. There's one other option I want to change over here. I'm going to change the opacity so it doesn't erase really harshly. I'm going to change it to about a 35%. So it would take 3 passes to erase something completely. And the Eraser tool, the best way to use it is to sort of use it to erase like you're washing a window. And wash around the outside, let go, and then wash again. So I'm going to go around this thing. Whoops. Now, I just realized I made a mistake. I'm washing the background. That was a mistake. I'm going to undo what I did. Did a little damage. Back to the photo. And now if I wash it, yes, I'm getting the results I want. The idea is to sort of don't touch your face with the Eraser tool. You don't want to erase you, but you erase the background. And then you can really go to town on the harsh edge there, and what you get is a cool little glow. To erase behind you, you don't have to come over here and click. Obviously that doesn't work. You can start erasing up here and then just kind of swoop behind the whole thing. And in this particular case, whoops, oh, I just dragged an extra guideline. Nice. I got that cool glow kind of going on there. That was a good background. And there's the erase trick. Make sure it all blends in nicely. And a gradient, that is a progression from one color to the other, just looks really good in Photoshop. Might be worth mentioning these guidelines. If you use the Move tool, these guidelines will not show up in your final image. They are just a way of saying, okay, there's the border between the menu and the title. And there's sort of the bottom edge there. And if you're going to move things around, it's not a bad idea to make things line up like this. But you can now start dressing this thing up using the text tool. You can start enhancing this thing a little bit. You could certainly start turning on other levels like this. And you know what? Maybe I'll move this thing up like this. I'm going to use this guideline to make sure that this element and this element are aligned like this. Customize your banner, and you're doing great. Let's go on to step 5. We did it. Step 5, save your work. Okay, 2 ways to save your work. First off, we've done a lot of work, and if there was a power failure, we'd lose it. So File, normally I'd say File Save, but let's use a Save As. And as a good habit to get into, anytime you start customizing things that becomes yours, change the name of it. Go to the very beginning, put your last name there, first initial, and then describe what it is.
Miriam, if you're in the building, please come to the main entrance quickly. The field trip is ready to go. That's Miriam. Please make your way to the front of the school quickly. Thank you.
Miriam, they're waiting for you at the field trip. TIJ portfolio banner makes sense. It's going to put in the extension. Layers is good, ICC. This is going to save it as a PSD or Photoshop file. We'll still have the original banner if we had to go back and get something from it, like the mind wheel that we deleted. But meanwhile, we've got something brand new. I hit save, and that's just us backing up our work. Something I don't like about this, I don't like that this element, I don't like that this element has a typo in it, so I'll double click it and fix the typo. Much better. Move tool, it's one of our best friends. I'd like to move this element and this element, these 2 lines of text, at the same time, move them over because they're a little too close to where the glow is, and it's hard to see white letters against a white background. To select multiple elements, hold down your, let's see, cancel. Hold down your shift key. Yep, that kind of doesn't, no, it doesn't do it. Cancel. Tell you what, I'm going to select it this way. I'm going to actually click the layer. And by the way, if it makes more sense to you, maybe I'll drag this layer below, because this appears on top of this. Doesn't matter which one's in front of which at this point. To select both these, I'm going to hold the control key down and notice that both layers turn black. And now if I move one, they actually both move. And I'm going to tap these things with the arrow keys to get them just exactly where I want them, just like that. Something else that might look good is to actually make these things align to the left and right. This is advanced typography. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Here's a trick to using the zoom tool. If you don't actually want to go to the toolbar, try holding the control key and your space bar at the same time, and no matter what tool you're using, it'll turn into a magnifying glass and let you zoom in. Likewise, if you want to move around, scroll side to side, you don't have to go down here. You can just hold down the space bar. It turns it into the hand tool, and then you can slide along. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to shrink the size of this so that this aligns to the right and the left. If you shrink or expand anything, always grab it by the corner handle, never the side or the top. If you use the side or top, it squishes it. Whoops. No, it doesn't. It squishes it. And that is disturbing the original aspect ratio. That's bad. Cancel that. The corner handle, it'll scale both the height and the width. And in this case, I can eyeball it and get it to line up really well. And now I've got nice alignment at both sides. And that's just good typography. Looks good. Okey-doke. Likewise, I've got the guideline. Looks like that is lining up with TIJ at the other side. Double click the hand tool. I'm ready to save it now. File. Now because we've already done a save as, I'm just going to hit save and it's going to save it under that new name. But the next big trick, we would like to save this for the web so that we can install the banner. So here it goes. We've saved the PSD version. Now we're going to save another version as a JPEG. And JPEGs are universally compatible with web pages. It says here use files, save for web, and make sure the format is JPEG. Okay, let's do that. So I'm going to use file, save for web. I like the shortcut for this. It's complex, but it speeds things up. There's a preview of both versions. This is the original. This is what it's going to look like. I wonder if I can show you the details at the bottom. Nah, I can't do that. Oh well. And up here it says this is going to be a JPEG quality of 70. Yep, JPEG, anything bigger than 70 is going to be good. There's no sense in making it 100. It's going to be bigger in file size, but not that much clearer. So I'm good with this. I just say OK, and then choose your location. Make sure you save it into your appropriate P drive in the appropriate folder. And the nice thing about this is it's going to pick up whatever the file name was for the PSD, so it's just going to name a JPEG version of that same thing. I'll hit save and I'm done. So ladies and gentlemen, there's lots more that you can do. You could customize the background here, but the last phase to this whole thing is installing it. So the installation, you know what, if I'm not mistaken, there is a video right here that you can watch for installing it. Give that a try. Good luck. See how you did.